Someone has already done and is already doing what you want to do. And no, they didn't fall into a rich family to do so. They were not born lucky. You know you can be more. You can have more, do more, and be more. You know this. You wouldn't be listening otherwise.
All right, Kevin O'Leary, O'Leary Investments, Shark Tank fame, friend of the show. I believe we got you mic'd up now. Kevin, thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. Appreciate your time, sir, as always. I only have a couple here with you. So I'm wondering what you make of this $35 trillion number. Put it in context for me. How big of a problem is it?
Big. And I think it's time to start addressing it. I mean, everybody has an idea. Here's mine. And I hope we can pull this off. We have to open up the ANWR. The annual federal royalty on any wellhead is 16.23%. If we open up the ANWR, sell the oil to the Asians, we can reduce that debt by 20% in 5 years by just making sure the law says that all 16.23% of the royalty goes to reducing debt. That's just the ANWR. That's oil. I think you can sell that because people will understand if we don't do this, we're screwed. And frankly, even if you hate hydrocarbons, you hate oil, you hate debt more. So this deal would be a piece of legislation that says there's no pork. The 16.23 off ANWR goes to national debt. By the way, the Norwegians did it in 1976. And within 11 years, they had $1 trillion fund. They're now the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world. We can do it too.
If that doesn't happen, though, like I hear your idea and I understand your idea, but that's your idea. And if Washington doesn't take you up on it, which is, let's be honest, probably unlikely, right? You know how things work in this town. What do we do? What happens next?
You know what I say to that? Give me a better idea. What do you got? Because right now, with an economy that's probably getting a little softer, you guys have just been detailing the consumer may be getting softer. The McDonald's data, people are worried about that. But this deficit is so huge that now we're at a place where we've got to have new ideas. If you've got a better idea, bring it. But I'm telling you, it's got to be addressed with legislation. Other countries have done this where they say, okay, enough. It's so big that we've got to pass a law that makes sure the money doesn't go somewhere else. The biggest problem we have in Washington is pork. It's back in a very big way. And 2 or 3 trillion of this debt has just been spent in the last 36 months with chips and science, IRA, infrastructure, yada, 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 woof, woof, woof. It doesn't matter what party's in place. This is just too crazy. And I think lawmakers are starting to get a little uncomfortable about it.
Kevin O'Leary, I wish we had more time. We know we'll have you on back soon. We got to run a break here, but appreciate it.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, fans, listeners, supporters, we are back with another episode of Key Factors Podcast, Real Estate AF, and the AF stands for And Finance, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. I brought along 2 intelligent gentlemen that would like to share in this discussion because the topic is so big. You can almost call it the national U.S. debt. So real quick, let me introduce my guest. I've got to my right, Andy Hilger. How you doing?
Good, Mark. How are you?
Doing very well. Very, very well. And then I've got John Hudson. How you doing, John?
Mark, it's great to be back. And I've got Boo Boo Bear here with me today, too.
And that is officially the second mini Yorkie we've had on the show. That's awesome. Yeah, mini Aussie. My apologies. Yes, I have one.
Yeah.
They're great dogs. They are super, super smart.
Oh, she's awesome.
Pain in the butt sometimes, though.
Yes. She could be a whiner.
There you go.
Great to be back.
Well, guys, today we're going to be talking about this bad boy. I'm going to throw it up here on the screen. JC, if you could, we're going to be talking about this U.S. debt clock. It's very nuanced. There's not a lot that you see out in the media regarding this. This website, anybody can go to, usdebtclock.org. And briefly, I'm going to run through what these little things mean. And then we're going to talk about each one of them, or we'll go off on tangents and rabbit holes because this is such a big topic.
Yeah, no, it's a death spiral. It's like a black hole of stuff.
There you go.
Exponential growth in the wrong direction.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
This is what
right.
we're dealing with. Yeah.
So there may be folks out there. Both John and Andy have been on the podcast before, but if you could, Andy, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then John, you can go next.
Yeah, Andy Hilger. I'm a local real estate broker with the Laffey Hilger Group, and we work with your company for the mortgage side quite frequently, and appreciate the invite from time to time to participate in cool content like this.
Absolutely. John?
Yeah, no, co-founder of H&M Mortgage Group, and been a mortgage professional for doing this for 26 years. Student of the business, fierce advocate for home ownership.
I love it.
So yeah, and I love hanging out with you and sharing my hot sports.
Always.
Opinions.
And you can't spell home without H&M.
No, you can't.
I love that. Well, gentlemen, this topic today, being so massive, we're like I mentioned to you guys, we're going to have a second part to this where I'll have some other give their feedback on this. But I want to kind of hone in on this right out the gates. So just to go over some basics for the folks at home listening, I want to focus on this top quadrant here. Now, mind you, I have to preface, this is not real time. This is actually an equation that they do that projects the real time. It's pretty accurate. They make adjustments from time to time, but it's pretty accurate. We're currently sitting at about $35 trillion in national U.S. debt. This is the total debt. Matter of fact, let me just run through these real quick. We've got the debt per citizen, if that were to be divvied up per citizen in the United States. Then they have the debt per taxpayer. And as you can see, that increases substantially, almost threefold. And we'll give our opinions on this stuff as well. This is the U.S. federal spending officially. And I want to say this is annually right here. Then you've got your U.S. budget deficit right here, and you can skip those. So down here at the bottom, this is the U.S. federal debt to GDP ratio. And as you can see, in 1960, we were at 52%. Then 1980, 34%. Basically, we got our stuff together for a little while there. Then it started to creep back up, but now we are currently sitting at 122% in the red, meaning we are spending way more than what is coming in.
If households treated their finances like the government does, we'd all be out on the streets.
Yeah, we would all be bankrupt. We would all be out on the streets. Absolutely. That is a great way to put that. There's quite a few different things that hopefully we'll be able to tie together on this. For example, if we have 4.9 trillion in revenue coming in, okay, and then revenue per taxpayer, 14,000. And you've got, let's see here. Matter of fact, let's see if I can zoom. I don't think it'll let me zoom, but you've got some statistics on here that don't fully jive with what we're actually doing or coming up with, especially down here at the bottom. In simple terms, if we are spending money on these three items at the bottom, you can see Social Security, you have Medicare, and you have liabilities. So this is basically interest and things of that nature that is just continuing to compile and compile. Now, there was another huge number that I want to find on here. Interest paid, boom. Total debt, $101 trillion. Then there's another that is about a 600 trillion number. Where can I find that? Right here. Nope, that's not it. Yeah, currency and credit. Yes, right here. Currency and credit. What this means, this number, $629 trillion, is a figure that we owe to other countries and or have in debt. That's just on paper.
Right.
Like,
Treasury market.
Absolutely. It's just like a fugazi of money that is trickling to steer these numbers. So at what point, I mean, guys, tell me your observations on just what we've discussed thus far.
I'll start exactly what John said here, Mark. This is like me saying, I owe you $10 billion. Owe you $10 billion. We'll work out a plan and we'll pay it back. Well, at some level, Andy's never going to be able to pay me back $10 billion. And that's exactly what you're dealing with here. I mean, you see the numbers and what the debt is growing at a rate far faster than what we're bringing in money through all sources of revenue, which would be mainly a combination of tax revenue, and the government brings in money through the bond market, all the treasury bills, T-bills, treasury notes. The way that bond market works is they take lump sums of money from other countries or anybody that wants to invest in the United States. And the funny thing, just a little side note, fun fact, is these are by the United States credit agencies rated some of the safest investments in the entire world for what that's worth. And, you want to collect that interest rate. You loan the United States $1 billion. And then if it's a 5% yield, they're going to pay you that percentage every year. What would that be? $50 million a year for 10 years. And on a 10-year bond, on year 10, you get your initial investment back.
Right.
And so the United States government makes a lot of money from that bond market, or borrows a lot of money through the bond market like that. And it's gotten a little out of hand. We've borrowed more money than we're ever going to be able to pay back. That is just a fact, I believe. And other countries are starting to figure that out. If you look into it any at all and track what holdings are of U.S. bonds, Japan's always number one. China has been number one forever, but they, for the last few years, have been aggressively selling U.S. Treasury bonds to the extent they can. And that's another thing that people don't understand. When you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars, it's not that easy to just go sell billions of dollars worth. There is a liquidity. Somebody has to buy it.
Right.
There's a liquidity aspect to this as well. And so China now is below 900 billion in U.S. bonds now, and they've been the biggest holding for a very long time. And many countries are selling, and there's a reason for that we can get into, but it certainly doesn't bode well for this. One of those reasons is probably at some point, just in that scenario that we gave earlier, if I owe you $10 billion and that debt keeps accumulating, long before we get there, you and Kristen probably have a conversation and go, man, this guy Andy that we loaned all this money, I don't know if he's going to be able to pay this back. You know what I mean? And I think at some level that conversation is being had, has been had, and maybe it's time to peel back some of these U.S. dollars that, on another fun fact we'll get into later, most countries in the world have had to keep on hand.
Right.
Due to the way OPEC and Saudi Arabia worked the petrodollar agreement from many, many years ago, and we can go into that later, but they have to have access to U.S. dollars because U.S. dollars is what oil is traded in, only up until very recently. And the bond market is the way that they retain that large amount of money in a liquid form where they can sell some and use it for commodities and have access to U.S. dollars in real high dollar quantities. But I think that's changing actively, actually, right now. Yeah.
I'll ask you why you think it's changing after.
Okay.
Or not after the podcast, but here shortly. Yeah. So, John, what are your thoughts?
Well, I've got lots of thoughts, right?
Like,
you sit there and you watch that, and it's hard not to just be mesmerized by this calculator that's just running and running and running and running and running.
You almost think it's fake.
Yeah, right. you almost think it's fake, and the real problem, in my honest opinion, is not enough people talk about this. The talking heads in the media right now would rather distract you with other items. There is a very important election that's happening in a couple of months.
Absolutely.
And the only way that this gets fixed is you've got to get your spending under control. And what I hate is, or what really kind of chaps my rear end is, what the talking heads will kind of allude to on television and whatnot, or even on the radio is, oh, the Dow is this, the Dow is that. Oh, and debt is okay because then stocks are going to go up. But and trust me, I am the farthest thing from an eat the rich kind of guy. But check this out. So the top 10% net worth households in the U.S. own 93% of all stocks in mutual funds.
Wow. That's not only is it, yeah, that's correct.
The top 1% own 55%.
Mm.
So who benefits? Yeah, if we continue to run up debt and their equities just continue to grow.
Right.
There's the top 10%, which I mean, that doesn't help anyone else.
So
check this
safe
out.
to say that it is a clear indicator that the stock market is not how we should base our economy.
Correct. And I don't, and so many people, they just get led that this is what you should believe. It's the same reason why people think they need to put 20% down to buy a house.
Correct. Yeah.
So check this out. The bottom 50% of America own just 1% of all stock in mutual funds in this country. So,
and those are typically in 401ks for your employer.
Correct.
It's not as though they made a conscious choice to say, I want to invest in this and that and that. No, they put it in a fund or a fund of funds.
They don't even know what's going on. It's just happening. So then I started going down this rabbit hole and show prep, right? So to be in the top 1% in this country, your household net worth needs to be worth $13.7 million. Now, check this out. And this was actually fascinating to me,
Huge
too.
Separation.
To be in the top 2%, you drops down to $2.5 million, which is still a big number out there.
But that's a big difference.
It's a huge difference. The top 5% is only $1 million. And then to be in the top 10% is $855,000.
Wow.
So again, this notion that, hey, U.S. debt is okay because the stock market's going to do great. That doesn't benefit most people out there.
No, not at all.
By far. And so then you get into what's happening with this election. And I don't want to really take things political, but you have...
And it's difficult not to with this type of topic.
Correct, because you've got somebody that is clearly, hey, we're going to continue to spend money versus somebody that's a business person. Now, I really don't care about any social issues.
Same.
I don't care what you want to do or how you identify yourself. There's only one thing that is a concern to me, and that's my wallet.
Yeah.
And it's because, I mean, I've got a puppy to take care of. I've got a daughter. I've got a family, right? I mean, these are the things that we should be worried about as a society. And again, I'm not a tax eat the rich kind of person, because check this out: the top 10% of earners pay 75% of all taxes.
That's right. And not to combat that, but to add the educational piece or the data behind it. JC, if you can throw that reference back up. Right in here, this shows the average or median income nationally, 39,000. And then it shows, where is it? I'm looking for taxes paid per individual if it was a fair budget, or if everybody paid their fair share. I think it was something along the lines of 13.5. Let's see if I can find it. Tax revenue, blah, 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 blah. Oh, where is that?
Either way, and it's going to be a number that is really, it's still inconceivable that people don't have.
Right.
And then you think about this, right? So all this does is continue to contribute to inflation, which continues to increase interest rates, which increase costs, which obviously makes the debt clock spiral go faster, right? Because now your debt service continues to go up. But even back on the family side, so Primerica released a report about a month ago showing that 46%, almost half of all middle income earners in the country have either severely cut or cut out altogether contributing to their 401k.
That's right.
So how in the hell do we help these people?
You know, what comes to mind, John, these statistics you share are pretty eye-opening. The concept of a Ponzi scheme is what comes to mind. You know, there's a debt spinning out of control that we all know, and anybody with any education level knows it's the numbers simply don't add up for it to ever get paid back.
Correct.
Meanwhile, the top 10% are making a huge, money hand over fist off of equities within the same system that are going through the roof.
It's very true. And it's a bit of a conundrum.
You have to recognize that's
without a doubt. So just the reality is, the only way you fix this is ultimately you've got to cut out spending.
Yeah.
I mean, slowing it down doesn't even do anything because your debt service is still so high.
Well, let's do that. Let's break down real quick for the folks. What I was looking for was right here. So essentially, we've got 4.9 trillion in revenue, and we're going to talk about what revenue is generated, how they can generate it. But per citizen, revenue is 14,783. Did you pay more than that in taxes? Pay more than that in taxes?
Yes. The key word there is citizen, which implies legally here too.
That is correct. That is very good. And they separate a couple of these things. That's not one of them. Now, the concept that I'm articulating here is if people say everybody needs to pay their fair share. Well, everybody's fair share is $14,783.
Right.
So if you paid over that, then technically you are paying more than your fair share into this thing called taxes.
Correct.
Right? If you didn't pay anything or you got a tax refund, anything along those lines, you're a part of the folks that are not paying their fair share. Logically, right? This is not an opinion. This is just using data.
You're using common sense, Mark. That's not fair. You can't do that anymore.
It's so true. It is so true. So guys, what ways does the U.S. government generate revenue? Because when you're dealing with, we'll call it a P&L, the only way to get your P&L back to black is increasing revenue substantially or lowering your expenses, which creates a bottom line for you.
Right. Taxes.
Yeah.
And
taxes.
and I would include all fees and taxes, driver's license, hunting license,
Right.
all that is ultimately tax that is just renamed differently for different purposes. And then selling U.S. bonds. And even when you hear the term, and it comes up frequently because apparently we're very good at it or like to do it, you hear the term printing money, that we're going to print more money.
Yes.
It's not actually printing money. Money prints take place all the time. Currencies redone and up and renewed all the time. And you go to the bank and get fresh currency, but that's not what they mean. Printing money is the United States government buying its own bonds. When they buy its own bonds, that is they buy it from themselves and put it in this system where it's going to get paid back along with everything else.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Correct.
And that's what they call printing money.
The Ponzi scheme.
The Ponzi scheme,
Yes.
That one there.
Wish we would have thought of that, John.
No kidding. No kidding. There's definitely some multi-level marketing.
These are the real pros.
Yeah. And that figure that Andy is referencing is this large number right here, $629 trillion that is out there in bonds, out there in debt that is propping us up. And it leads to this idea of, okay, if the only way for the U.S. to generate revenue is taxes and fees and selling bonds, well, what happens if nobody wants to buy our bonds anymore?
Well, right, because all this does is it devalues the dollar.
Yes, sir.
And makes it worth less.
That actually leads to another topic, and I don't know if you guys are ready to get into it just yet, but the idea of this inflation. And if inflation stays higher, essentially, it runs off some of the paper debt, essentially, which hurts us, but helps that budget. You guys ever think about that?
Yeah. Yes and no. I mean, it really does. I mean, look, there's going to be pain regardless.
Absolutely.
I mean, and it really is across the board. Because we saw it, and probably the greatest example for people's short-term memories is what happened when mortgage rates dropped to 2.5%.
It was a frenzy.
Where was the inflation?
Inflation
Housing.
was, yeah, absolutely.
Right. I mean,
absolutely.
we got
to leverage more.
We got 10 to 12 years worth of property price appreciation in two.
That's right.
And then who did it hurt?
It hurt the American people.
People trying to buy a house.
Yep.
And at the same time too, I mean, who did it help?
Us.
Well, yeah.
I mean, we'll be honest.
There was
right, but it was temporary.
It was short term.
Yeah.
We paid a lot of taxes because
absolutely.
of it.
Yes,
so
that is correct.
So it is a chess game, and that is a chess game that the Fed is in a very tough position because you're right. The longer that they keep rates higher for longer, the more that there's going to continue to be a runoff, right, of government held treasuries.
Sure.
They're ultimately going to be paid off. It's going to run off of that. You're also going to have more inventory coming back in, right? So you should be seeing some suppression on home prices, which I kind of believe we're there. I mean, the American consumer is tapped out. I mean, every loan application I see right now is they just can't afford the payment anymore. We finally hit the X mark, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just,
finally crossed the line.
Yeah. So higher for longer is good, but at the same time, too, now you run into this potential of, well, if we drive into a job loss recession, well, now there's less revenue coming in the door.
It's absolutely correct.
But the only good part of it would be that rates are going to be forced to go back down.
Correct.
Which is going to lower the debt service.
It is.
Right. So,
but in turn, what is that going to do with properties again?
The feeding frenzy will come back.
There you go. The supply demand, that basic concept.
So, more fun fact for you, right? So, 22% of all U.S. mortgages right now that are outstanding are below 3% on a fixed rate. 57% are below 4% on a fixed rate. 76% are below 5% on a fixed rate. Now, if we ever see 2, 3, even low 4 interest rates again, then there's something really, really wrong with the economy.
I agree.
I hope that we can get down maybe into the mid 5s, because maybe that might be enough to get some people off the ledge to go, you know what? I'll go ahead and sell my house and maybe buy something else.
Right.
Because the more inventory that we're also able to get out there into the marketplace,
that's right,
is going to bring, it's going to put pressure on home price, increase.
That's right.
And then maybe we get some affordability back.
Well, to use as an example, I just finished a Zoom call yesterday with a good close friend of mine, and they reached out to seek advice for their situation. He's getting ready to go back to school to become an attorney, and taking that lunge is going to set their finances in a different direction than they have been. Mind you, he makes good money now. He's just life change. I want to seek something that has more meaning, etc. So their goal or their idea initially was to sell their current home, $500,000 plus, purchased it with a 5% interest rate. So the payment, you're looking at about $4,000, $4,200 on $500,000. Coming to the conclusion, and I'll make this story short, is if they were to sell their home currently, yes, they'd get a little equity out, which helps their situation cushion-wise, but that wasn't their goal. It was to lower their monthly expenses. So the idea behind selling $500 at a $4,200 payment so that they could downsize and hopefully get a lower payment leads them all the way down to a $300,000 home, or else if you want $400, it's going to be the same payment you have now.
Right.
Literally.
Right.
So the advice that was given there.
Where do you find a $300,000 house?
Touche.
Yeah.
Advice given there was, guys, it's probably best to look at other assets, other factors in your budget to save that monthly. Let's take some of these savings and pay off this auto loan so you can relieve $800 a month in your actual monthly debt, and just buckle up, because the idea is you just bought this house 2 years ago. So is there equity? Sure, there's a little bit of equity, but not enough equity to justify the downshift and the lateral move in your monthly budget.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
That's not to go too far off a tangent,
Sure.
but you just said something this is something that does actually concern me. You and I have this conversation all the time. We see the new home sales counselor not licensed, advertising 3.99% rates.
Yep.
Whatever. I'm going to continue to troll them and ask them where their NMLS number is. But where I'm going with that is, we all know where that money is coming from. Well, the consumer doesn't, but they're financing all of their incentives in the price of the house.
That's right.
So, we are moving towards a recession. Mortgage rates will be coming down over the course of the next, year, 2. How are those people going to be able to refinance into a lower rate if they don't have the equity in that property? Because it's all been built up.
That's a good point. It truly is. Because most of and what John's talking about with the new construction model is they are pushing for these 2-1 buy downs heavily, which most, if not all of us mortgage professionals can do that loan for anybody. Does it fully make sense to do that. You're taking a temporary rate buy down where you're paying all this money up front. You're just paying the interest for the first year and then 2 years if it's a 2-1 buy down, so that you can go potentially next year to refinance. But then when you go to refinance, there's no equity. Why? Because you bought the rate down already.
Yeah. Because you financed $30,000 of incentives in there.
That's right.
So, I mean, and that has definitely played into an inflationary impact on housing. But
and people will ask, well, what's the justification for them charging $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 over the sales price? Well, they're not. They're the ones that are controlling the sales prices and the comparables within that neighborhood
until they want to close it out.
That's right. That's right. And then it's fire sale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned something, and that actually is on here, and it's employment. Let's see here. This figure right here, and I'm going to zoom in so people can see this a little bit better. U.S. workforce and official unemployment. So right now it's sitting at 6.8 million in unemployment. And that's the statistic or the data, the figure that is being portrayed to the public on all these media sources. Now, see this number right below it? The actual unemployment, 13 million, essentially. So double almost what, it is double what they're portraying. So if it says 3% in unemployment rate, it's probably at 6. And if we were basing our Fed decisions on unemployment, what number should they be using? Well, right now they're definitely using this one, which is why rates are higher. But if they use this one, we'd have to see rates come down, because essentially that would put that indicator in their scope of what it is that we need to move this needle, essentially.
And I don't know if you guys have noticed the cool trend lately on this topic, because I do look at these numbers every month when they come out. And now when the numbers come out every month, they provide you with that lower number that we all know that's not correct. But then there's also a revision made. Have y'all seen that? We looked into it, and last month actually is this. Yeah. Well, that's done on purpose, and that's psychological. No, when you're looking at the data right now for June, nobody cares about May anymore. It's behind you. You know what I mean? And so the information comes out, and down the road, it's going to be there. But when people actually read it and process it and make decisions off of it, you are being provided with inaccurate information.
That's correct.
Bottom line.
And it is 100% political.
100% politically motivated.
I mean, it's which is a shame, right? Because again, I really don't care what side of the aisle you are, as long as you get that under control and stop spending money.
That's a complaint I've made for a while now. Most recently with the situation in Ukraine, it was eye-opening. I've complained for years that politicians can't agree on anything. They can't agree on anything. They can't agree on a budget. They can't agree on how to spend money. You need $10. Nobody's going to agree, and they're going to be deadlocked on that $10. We need $100 billion for war. Everybody can agree today to send $100 billion out for war. Yeah. Without question, don't need it. The bill doesn't need to be read. We all agree. We're good. Send the money now.
Yeah.
That should be very concerning for people.
And also in that bill, how much of that is also pork?
I mean,
it's just
I will refrain from speculating like how much pork and how much side deals and money is being made within that $100 billion. Yeah. I just think I don't want to know. I'm certain it is astronomical. Right.
Because in the end, this money that they are using to pay for all this stuff, it's our money.
Yeah. It's our kids.
It's absolutely. It's our kids' future and our current money. Yeah. If you look at it grand scheme. Now, that being the case, man, there's so many different ways that we can go on this sucker. There really is. So we were talking about the ways that revenue comes in. I'd like to hone in on where the money is being spent, because you hear a lot of stuff like Social Security is going to be cut and Medicaid is going to be cut. So if you look at it, grand scheme, that's the totals. Let me get to the average. It's got to be here somewhere. That is the totals, 27. There's got to be one. where it shows how much we actually spend each year to essentially balance this budget, so to speak. So if we've got 4.9 trillion coming in, what we spend is those three factors that I had mentioned before, and they're on there somewhere.
Yeah, but like if you go up to the top left, all the way there, you see
There
US.
we go.
US.
That's exactly what I'm looking for.
Yep.
So this right here, guys, these 4 boxes, 1, 2, 3, 4, is literally where the largest budget items go. You've got your Medicare and your Social Security, 2 of the biggest talking points that they're going to cut this, they're going to cut that. Well, I mean, that totals up to just these 2 in itself. We're looking at, what is that? 3, almost 3, little over 3 trillion, 3.2 trillion. Well, what we have in revenue coming in covers that. No problem. What we're looking at here is our defense and war. Do we need to be spending that much each year? I don't know. I mean, yes, no, maybe so.
There's a lot of bad guys out there.
Guys, and I'm okay with that if we are safe.
Right.
I feel safe, no problem.
Yep.
So the last piece is this interest on debt yet again.
That's crazy.
Yeah. If you worth looking into, though, that was a very valid point, Mark, as long as you're safe. How much money of that is sent elsewhere? Is the question you should be asking. I bet it is more than half of that is sent elsewhere.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
But the mere fact that we're, I don't know, 6 months away maybe from actually spending more on debt service than what we spend on our military.
That's nuts.
That's insane.
Nuts. In addition, this debt is basically stuff that we are buying and at higher rates because we need the revenue to inflate the dollar in itself. Right. Am I right there?
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. We're devaluing the dollar.
There you go. Yeah.
Right. And that's causing rates to go up because, again, to Andy's point, you still need people to buy your debt. And the only way you're going to do that is if I'm going to get a decent rate of return.
That's right.
So
nobody's doing it for free. Nobody's doing it as a favor. And what ends up happening is this debt here doesn't continue to rise at the same amount or the same frequency. It will almost double and sometimes go higher simply because it's a large amount at a large interest rate. And then when the decision comes that we need more, boom, it jumps up again.
Right. And the Fed should be, probably a 90% chance now that the Fed will cut rates. I mean, they're not going to cut them tomorrow, but I think in September, there's a 90% chance that they'll cut rates, which will, you'll see the clock slow, but not stop.
No, correct.
And you really just need to get, I believe that.
Let's pause and talk about that for a moment.
Yeah.
Because we've got 3 gentlemen that follow not only politics, but the economy and things of that nature. How true do you think that September prediction is? Because they've said it many times before and it didn't happen. I've got my beliefs. Matter of fact, I'll go first.
All right.
I believe that there will not be a rate cut until after the election, simply because you've got one party that if rates are cut, essentially inflation will go up. It will look bad on the party and it will instantly be a negative view to the public because we feel inflation quickly as consumers. And if they are keeping them higher or not moved, it essentially compresses that inflation, thus baking the consumer into thinking that the economy's doing fine. Our inflation is steady. We've got it under control. Now you just need to elect us so that we can continue moving this forward type concept. That's just my thoughts. Might have a tin hat on, but what are y'all's thoughts?
Oh, go for it, Andy.
Well, I've had plenty of opinions on this over time. I watch all the Fed meetings. I'm a super nerd. I listen to all the Jerome Powell's, Fed conferences and Q&As afterwards. And I can tell you this much. I do track it every time they talk about a prediction of, I think at the end of last year, they were saying we may start reducing rates by September of 2024. And then in an earlier in the year meeting that moved up. It was going to be sooner than later. Then it moved back. I think managing the Ponzi scheme's a hard job. So, you know what I mean? It's very complicated. I think it becomes, it comes with you being very good at manipulation and smoke and mirrors. And I don't think it matters anymore one word that's spoken. I don't know that there is any way to predict it. That guess you have is as good as any I would make. I really don't know.
How about you, John?
See, I'm on the other side of the camp, and I will put my, wear my tinfoil conspiracy hat with pride, and I'll say this, right? Weathermen and economists also are the only two that could, be wrong at the time and keep their jobs. But I do believe that they will cut rates by a quarter point.
Okay.
The Fed has kept, a very tight monetary policy. I mean, that's higher for longer. It's been going on for a long time. The data is showing that inflation is slowing. We're not seeing deflation, but it's slowing.
Mm-hmm.
Even the job openings report that even came out today was a little hotter than anticipated, but it was very slightly hotter.
Right.
And so there's not as much job hirings that are going on.
Well, what I'm seeing, and I don't want to break up, but I think it calls for it. A lot of the data that we're seeing includes folks that have 2 and 3 jobs.
Yes, it does.
And that's where it's kind of a skewed figure.
Well, we created 1 million part-time jobs.
That's right.
Well, they say 1 million jobs. They leave the part-time out, right? No, that's people are getting second and third jobs to pay the bills.
You're right.
It's manipulated, very similar to that jobs data you pointed at earlier. Something that a lot of people don't realize, when inflation first started to go up and it went to whatever it went up to 7 or 8 or 9%, I don't know. And we had to start cutting rates, and it happened at raising rates at a historical rate to offset this inflation. And then now we're getting the news stories, that it's better. It went down to 5, that it's better. It went down to 4. That's a year-over-year comparison number.
Right.
Correct.
It's going up.
So correct. People use the language, and the media uses the language that inflation is coming down. This is a year-over-year comparison. So if last year it's 7% and now it's only 4% more than it was last year,
right,
we're at 10% above what we were 2 years ago. And nobody ever explains it to the public that way. They don't ever. But that's the reality of it.
And that's where my tinfoil conspiracy hat believes that they will cut, because this administration also needs a victory lap.
Yeah.
They want to be able to say, what we've done. Yeah, we've done this for you.
Absolutely. And I don't disagree with that at all. But I do think that will be a last ditch effort, and probably September makes sense if that is the case.
Yeah. And mortgage rates, right, over the course of last month, we've seen them improve a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's because the market is already kind of pricing in this idea.
Speculation. Absolutely. That's what that is. And for you guys listening, the idea behind when the Fed cuts rates, chances are, more times than not, the mortgage lenders that you get your loans from have already cut their rates in anticipation of that. It's very typical for the announcement to come out that they say, nope, we're not going to be cutting rates. And all of a sudden your mortgage rates then start to trickle up because we made anticipating moves thinking that it was going to come down, et cetera.
Yeah.
It's called the Fed funds rate, and it's a benchmark rate. It just sets the market.
Yes.
The free market is going to make an adjustment, you know what I mean? And the Fed is very rarely going to actually borrow the money because there's so much competition to step in and do so.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And they'll price accordingly.
The Fed essentially lends the money to the institutions that are getting that money to lend to the consumer.
Correct.
So, I mean, that in itself, and Andy, JC, if you can throw that reference up just briefly, we've got right here, it was May of 22 that we reached 9% inflation. This was at the end of the pandemic. In my opinion, living in Texas, this is after the pandemic was over already.
But think about that. We heard for a year that this inflation was "quote unquote" transitory.
Yes.
Yeah. It's all cool. Yeah. It's just
inflation's going away. Don't look over here.
Yeah. And you also hear that this side inherited inflation at X amount, et cetera. It's just using data and stats to make your own opinion. So as of May of 24, we're back down to 3.3%, but I think this has already gone up, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, inflation in itself contains some things that should be used to calculate that figure, but there are also other things not in that figure that should be used to calculate that inflation that most people do feel in their daily lives. But that's a different conversation.
Well, right. I mean, home prices. I mean,
There you go.
Look on the debt clock here. Look, median new home in 2000 was 165,000. Today it's 408, according to that.
Where are you looking?
Right there in the middle. Go up, to the right, down, in the green. To the left, to the left. There you go.
Boom.
Right
there you go.
So yeah, I mean,
wow.
I mean, that's 24 years, right? I mean, and that I believe also shows why it's so important that, man, if you could manage your own personal debt service on a mortgage, you need to be buying a house versus renting.
For sure.
Because, we do, I mean, at the end of the day, America does have the best mortgage product on the planet.
Right.
And it is the ultimate hedge against inflation. It's a 30-year fixed rate.
That's right.
So, I mean, like if you get in today and rates are, 6.5 to 7.5, just using that as a ballpark figure. I'm not quoting anything, right? But that's fixed for 30 years. And if rates do drop down low enough, then you have an opportunity to refinance and take advantage of that. But it will never go up.
Right.
So, I mean, think of all the people that, again, are stuck sitting on a 2.5% mortgage with 7% inflation everywhere else.
Yeah.
They're hanging in there.
That's right.
They're doing all right.
That's right.
So it's.
And, it comes to mind when you're looking at this insanity, you have a physical asset too. They can't get caught up in the, if, there's
Anything,
the Ponzi scheme breaks down, you've got a physical asset that's not impacted by that. Right.
I mean, and if inflation is hitting my household enough and I have to stop contributing my 401k, at least there's still savings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the only fear in that is if it were to be such a breakdown that there is no way to extract the equity out of the property in itself. What would that be? I mean, the collapse of the dollar, maybe. I mean, what do we gauge? Now we can put the tinfoil hats back on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at your brick buddies.
Yeah.
There you go.
Something I had taken some notes on. Yeah.
Can you take us through that? We're going to go down for the last 15 minutes here.
Yeah.
We're going to go down Conspiracy Island.
Wow. Love it.
Okay.
And I don't even think it's a conspiracy, but matter of fact, let's just do this. What does the acronym BRICS
Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
And what is it? Let's see. Boom. There it is. So if I make this bigger, this is a concept that I did not know about, was not privy to until Andy brought it up to me. And then I started doing some research, and it was almost one of those aha epiphany moments of clarity in what's going on, essentially. Andy, if you could explain to us what this is.
So I've looked into it a little bit. BRICS is an organization that was started by other countries. The ones mentioned, the five mentioned there are the initial countries. There's since been 5 or 6 that are added on. You can look those up publicly. And then there's the hardest thing about the world nowadays is getting real information. There is somewhere, I've heard numbers as low as 40, and I've heard numbers as high as 120 countries that have applied and are trying to enter the program.
Mm-hmm.
It started in 2009 by other countries after our 2008 financial crisis. A lot of these countries became very concerned with our finances as a country. You see what the debt's doing.
Yeah.
That they underestimated our bailout game. You know what I mean? That we'll just pay it all off and add to the debt and keep it going. And while they were actually concerned that we were, maybe dealing in the real world, they started another alternative to buy commodities with and to trade, because right now the petrodollar is or previously the petrodollar agreement with Saudi Arabia is the only way you could buy oil and commodities from OPEC and Saudi Arabia and countries like that. So they started working on their own system to to be able to buy large commodities without being
An alternative
dependent
source.
on the dollar.
Yeah.
Well, they're like the mean girls. They're jealous of the U.S.
Correct. And then we threw it in the Ponzi scheme. We bailed everything out, and that whole concept got tabled. Well, it was reignited recently vigorously when Russia invaded Ukraine. The United States put multiple. If you haven't read the sanctions that we have as a country and the West has as a country on Russia, you should do that just to educate yourself. Some of them are extremely intrusive to the point where somebody in another country,
Just takes it away.
Does any kind of, exchange with anybody Russian. We have the right to seize everything they own, and we seized, just like every other country, because of the petrodollar agreement. Russia had $300 and something billion in U.S. bonds and treasury notes, and we seized all that. And not only did we seize all that, we convinced our counterparts or our minions in Europe to do the same thing. So anybody that owned, European bonds for diversification or whatnot from Russia, that money got seized as well. Well, they went back to the drawing
board right there real quick, because I want to make sure that this is clear what you just mentioned. So essentially, the U.S. said, hey, is that your money? Great. It's now our money.
But we called it a sanction. But yes, I mean, we had a term for it. We're going to.
I just wanted to put it.
We are going to sanction this money because we don't agree with how you're handling this situation with Ukraine,
right.
And whether that's right or wrong is not the fact here.
No.
The point is that they have since worked with these other countries to reignite this BRICS idea, kind of under the premise of hey, if you're on the wrong side, if you're on the wrong side of a disagreement with the United States, they just might seize all your shit. You know what I mean? And nobody wants to deal with that when you're talking about billions of dollars. And now that it has actively happened, other countries are seeing that. And I think that's why you see a huge pullback in our bond market. Mm-hmm. And why would you want to have that much money tied up in U.S. bonds if there is a chance you're not going to get paid back because you have some kind of bona fide disagreement?
Right.
There's the numbers of who owns those bonds. So that's
throw those up there, JC, reference real quick.
So
while he's talking,
BRICS has now gotten, like I said, to where they are actively buying and selling commodities. They've figured out an exchange where if you're in, India and you want to buy a commodity, you can use your rupees to buy that commodity from Saudi Arabia, and they'll exchange it or OPEC typically.
Whereas before you had to exchange it to the U.S. dollar, then purchase.
Before you had to use U.S. It was the only thing. So there was a petrodollar agreement that went into place. It was 1973. Henry Kissinger, the Secretary of State at the time, was sent by the president, Richard Nixon, and met with King Faisal of Saudi Arabia off the coast of, on an aircraft carrier. Yep. And they came up with this deal. I sent you the picture of that.
No, yeah.
They came up with it. They came up with this agreement that and this was shortly after the United States went off the gold standard, for what they tell you. Ultimately, we agreed to provide protection to Saudi Arabia. You've wondered why we have military bases scattered around the desert we don't use? That's why. We agreed to protect them militarily in exchange for them requiring all countries that buy oil commodities from OPEC have to use the U.S. dollar. Well, that's huge for us. Every country has to have liquid U.S. dollars and billions of them.
Correct.
That's why our bond markets thrived for so many years. And that was a 50-year agreement that some people think expired on June 9th of 2024 from back in 74. You can't find real data on that here. You can find news articles from other countries that insinuate that, yes, that is the case. We have not shared that here publicly.
No.
And as a matter of fact, I showed you that. I hate the term when people say I'm going to Google it or I'm going to Google that shit. I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to say you're not that intelligent, but you don't know how it works. You know what I mean? If you knew how it works, you would not do that. And there's a big difference.
Well, I always say if you Google something, you're going to find exactly what you're looking for, wrong or right.
Or what Google wants you to find.
They're going to show you what they want you to see. Once you know how it works and you understand it, I use it all the time. for the sole purpose of I want to see what they are showing everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, that's it. They're really the only reason. That information's valuable to me, but I know it's not real. And there's a good example with this topic here. I showed you that. You Google the agreement, you can see there's newspaper articles about it. You can see the pictures of them on the aircraft carrier working out this deal, how great it was. I've actually read the document. There's plenty of information out there where you can read info on this deal. And then if you Google, did it go away and was it not extended in this year? You get a pop-up that says there was never an agreement. What are you talking about? There was no such thing. This is
You
all,
know too much.
This is all pretend. Yeah,
Over here.
there was never an agreement about a petrodollar. So very odd, right? I mean, it's pretty interesting. So I think we're actively seeing that right now of this, I guess, scare that maybe having all your eggs in this basket isn't so smart if they're willing to seize all that money if the circumstances come along that you find yourself on opposite ends of some type of conflict. And many countries are looking for alternatives to that system.
I think many Americans are also trying to find different solutions like crypto, but at the same time, if crypto is becoming regulated, is it really an alternative method at the end of the day?
Well, I was just going to say, the only thing I would add about the BRICS too is that a lot of those countries too, they're not exactly our friends either.
No,
they're not. Yeah.
I mean, between China and Russia, there is absolutely, it is a form of warfare.
That's right.
Yeah, economic
warfare. Yeah. And because they want to weaken the dollar.
Yes.
Which drives up
now, let me ask,
here.
Is it weakening the dollar or is it putting it on a stage to show that it is not as strong as they're representing it to be by doing so?
Well,
does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I guess overall,
because technically, if you look at this bad boy right here, we've got $629 trillion that we'll never pay back.
I guess you could equate it to a home price, right? What is a home price? It's whatever somebody's willing to pay for it.
That's right.
So yes, it does weaken the dollar in that, by putting it on the stage, perhaps that, oh man, okay, well, America's got their problems. But at the same time too, these other countries, I mean, yeah, we have inflation issues. There's no doubt. A lot of these other countries, though, they have like hyperinflation and whatnot. So they're in well off worse shape than we are.
Yeah.
It was, just 30 years ago, I mean, Russia had bread lines for crying out loud, right? And China had famine.
Right.
So, but these guys, they're not exactly our friends. It is a form of warfare, and they are trying to weaken the U.S. leadership and dominance in the world. So that is something absolutely that we need to continue to be aware of. And, I don't know what the answer to that is. Those countries and BRICS, they're not strong enough to challenge the dollar by themselves. And they're having to do it as a group. That
makes sense. That does make sense.
But we need. Oh, that's a good picture.
Oh, Lord Jesus.
But we do need a stronger dollar. This is why we got to get our spending under control, because if we do have a stronger dollar, then costs do go down, right? We're not having to pay more dollars for goods that we're importing, which then ultimately get passed on to the consumer, right? It brings everything down. This is why I go back to, and quite frankly, I don't believe that it was because of his genius, but during Trump's term, we did have some of the lowest oil prices, I mean, for economic reasons in history. And what it did was it lowered the cost to move goods everywhere.
Right.
And overall lowered the cost of goods. And so that's why you had extremely low inflation coupled with a sustained period of low interest rates. I mean, I'm even going back before COVID. I mean, we still had almost a zero interest rate policy,
right?
And low inflation. So you could see that it is sustainable and it can work. I mean, all those loans we were doing in 2018, 2017, those were 4% 30-year fixed rate mortgages.
Absolutely.
And we
4 and 5%.
Yeah, and we didn't have hyperinflation in home prices.
Not at all. I thought we had a pretty healtly market.
It was healthy, right? 5-6% per year. Not
steady growth.
30% in 1 year.
Yeah, that's unstable.
So this is why we've got to get, coming full circle. You got to get that under control so you can have a stronger dollar, so you could continue to push back challenges to our currency.
Correct.
And then this way, the consumer is actually able to get into something that they can afford.
Yeah.
Which, if the consumer is able to get into something they can afford, they can build net wealth. So that way, when they pass away 30 years from now, there's an asset that they're leaving to their heirs.
That's right. That's right. So I was putting together the totals of just those top 5 that own, that have United States debt. We owe them money.
Correct.
It only totals up to about 3.2 trillion. So what that tells me is the remainder of all that debt we own ourselves.
Yeah.
We own a lot of it ourselves.
Right.
That is correct.
So it's just this big old fugazi.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So to close this thing out, because we're probably at the hour mark, yeah. 15 seconds away from it.
All right. All right. Good time. Perfect.
And this is a crazy question. You guys can answer however you'd like. If at a certain point there is a continued revolution of countries doing what BRICS is doing things that undermine the US based on the fact, in my opinion, on fear that we will not attack because of our military, obviously how much we spend each year on that. Let's say that fear goes away and they decide to continue to do this. Let's say crypto does do what they're intending to do, or they find another source. How do you prepare for that, or what does that mean for the US and the dollar? Because we can all see transparently that it is propped up on paper.
Yeah. Right.
Somebody like, I think one of you mentioned it before. If we were personally in the same situation as what we're seeing here, we would not be allowed to do what we do.
This is like me owing you $10 billion.
Yeah.
Right, Mark? Okay, hey, can I get another $2 million?
I can put something on it.
Put it on the list. Yeah. Right.
What's that line? If you owe $1 million, it's your problem. If you owe $100 million, it's the bank's problem.
Yeah, it's
right.
Not my problem anymore because it's never going to happen. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if that were to come to pass, I mean, what does that mean? What would,
I think,
broad question, but go for it.
I think it's significant, and I think it's worth tracking. I think you probably will, this BRICS thing. Now, you mentioned cryptocurrency, what they're working on actively, and you can monitor this. You have to understand you can't do it from here. You need to be on Twitter or X, and all my everything I track are embassies and officials of other countries, and that's really the only way to get good information. But they are actively working to create a cryptocurrency platform that they will own that'll be a BRICS cryptocurrency. So all these different currencies can buy the cryptocurrency from, dinar, rubles, rupees, whatever it is you want. They can buy that cryptocurrency, and then they use that to buy the commodities. So this thing is growing very quickly on a very high level. What it means for us, I've thought about that a lot, and I don't know. 60% of American dollars are not in the country. 60% of our float is outside of the United States, much of it being used by other countries for all these various things. If that goes down and half of that money comes back here, what does that mean? I don't know. I really don't. I know it's not good. Right. I know that much. If us three ended up on an island and we wanted to be able to exchange, you raised animals and you caught fish and I hunted, and we wanted to be able to exchange stuff. And so we came up with some tokens to trade, you know what I mean? So that we can make change. Yeah. Your fish is not worth as much as your animals. So we've got something to hedge the value. That would be pretty standard. That's how barter and currency works. But you can't just come in and say, well, this is cool. Why don't we all get an extra 2,000 coins? You know what I mean? Right. Then we can buy more stuff. It wouldn't work that way, right? And that's exactly what's happened here, I think, or is what is happening here as some of that money comes back home. How it's going to work, I don't know. We're really good at, just adding it into the red numbers here and moving on down the road. That's true. So I assume that's what's going to happen, but I don't think it's good. Yeah.
Right.
Well, two things there. And I would say with regards to the red numbers, you got to stop spending and also finding alternative ways to bring revenue in, right? As managing profit and loss statements, you could only cut back however many staples you need to buy.
That's right.
Right. You still need to get revenue in the door there. Now, the other thing too, with the crypto stuff, I'm not 100% convinced on it just yet. I mean, it was what, less than 15 years ago, some dude bought a pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin. Right. I mean, so what's backing it? And if there is a significant,
It would, I think, essentially be the faith of the people, which is the same concept that's backing the dollar and our faith in that dollar.
yeah,
Because what happens one day when you go to the store to pay for your groceries and they say, I'm sorry, we're not taking that.
We're not taking that anymore. Yeah.
you know, well, and the other thing too, right? I mean, I was at I think 7-Eleven or Circle K, a gas station, and there's now a Bitcoin vending machine.
Oh.
So I get very suspect when it's like the dumb money is coming in. Somebody has Bitcoin now that they're selling.
Yeah.
Now you got all this hype out there, and the quote unquote dumb money's coming in, and now you got a Bitcoin vending machine. Yeah, I get suspect. You know, you get back into the tulip thing from Holland. So I'm not 100% convinced on it. What's backing crypto? I mean, it is the faith of the people, but if people lose faith, I mean, it's not like there's shiny gold.
Right. It's not backed by gold
There's not oil that's backing it. So what is backing it other than some countries that hate the United States?
And honestly, you have to use US dollars to purchase that Bitcoin anyway.
Right. So
no, but you had a really good point about what backs it. Well, what backs the US dollar? I mentioned that earlier. You know, we got off the gold standard. Everything you read says, 1973, we got off somewhere right around there, we got off the gold standard. And maybe that's true to an extent, but in April 20th of 1933, FDR signed an executive order that said, if you want to collect your U.S. debt, we will no longer pay it in gold. Up until that point, you could say, I want some of the gold or I want U.S. dollars. Well, as of 1933, you could no longer collect the gold. So to me, that's kind of the same thing, right? I mean, you can't actually, from 33 to 71, we said, well, we won't give you the gold, but trust us, it's in this big fort. There. It's all there in Kentucky. It's right there. Yeah. You're good to go. And then at some point, all those years, 40 whatever years later, we said, oh, never mind. We're just not going to, don't worry about it anymore.
Would it be a little nutso if the whole time the idea was the money is in the vault, secured, etc. Fast forward, you open the door, there's nothing there.
I don't know.
It's all a Fugazi.
In 1970, gold was
say that about religion.
$35 an ounce.
Yeah.
Now it's $2,500 an ounce. You know what I mean?
Jason, if you want to throw that reference up, it's
there's
right
gold
there.
Yeah.
Yep. I mean, since 73, like you said.
Yeah. There was $35 an ounce in 1973.
Yep.
And we go off the gold standard and it rips like that. That's
weird. That's so weird.
Yeah.
I don't know a lot, but I know when something's really weird, right?
Yeah.
That's really weird. Yeah.
Well, gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. A lot of doors have been open, and I don't think that there was intention of solving the world's problems here.
No, but people need to be thinking about it.
Absolutely.
Especially if they have kids.
Should be understanding it. Should be trying to, when you're trying to learn. I hope everybody is trying to make an effort to learn how to gather real information. You know what I mean? What steps need to be done? What do you need to look at to get real information? Because if you're looking at news articles and making decisions, you are being manipulated on a level that you cannot understand. That's what I mean?
That's
and absolutely.
And a lot of things tend to fall on the feelings versus fact.
Right.
And for those listening, watching, utilize the US debt clock.org, and you will see plenty of additional statistics like your mortgage loan calculators, home sales, auto sales, energy output, gold prices, all of the things in addition
it's a really cool website.
It really is.
Yeah.
And utilize this website if you're making any kind of points or decisions on the future, because the data is here. It's not like this figure all of a sudden increases substantially. It is pretty accurate. Now, is it exact play-by-play? It is not. There's, I don't think, any way to actually do that. But yeah, there's just so much here that each one of these is a topic of discussion technically.
Yeah. Another good topic to go down in the future, Mark, is you see how that currency and credit derivatives, Warren Buffett has been screaming this for 10 years that the derivatives market is going to blow everything up. You could do a whole podcast on this, but once upon a time, you had all those rich people that own stock. Once upon a time, you've got one stock, and it was a paper certificate, and somebody owned it.
Yeah.
Well, now the brokerage house keeps it, and off that one stock, they've got people shorting it. They've got people buying. They've got people buying options on it.
That's right.
And
calls and puts,
and we're talking thousands of them that go out on chains for. Some that expire tomorrow, some expire next week, some expire next month, next year, and it never ends. Well, Warren Buffett has the best question of all. So let's break it down to one piece of paper and one person that owns a stock. And if we get a, statistical anomaly event outside of any normal standard deviation, you know what I mean, that happens up or down, who owns it? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, who that? You know what I mean?
Like, you're saying that if you are a company owned by BlackRock and you make a hedge bet or a bet to essentially bet that Donald Trump media is going to crash the day before the assassination attempt, and you're incorrect, you can't just say that it was an error.
Right.
It's just an error. Did you think about that?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I just stumbled into some
We changed our mind.
Yeah.
We changed our mind.
Yeah, I don't want them anymore.
That's right.
They don't let me do that when I make bad breeds. You know what I mean? But yeah. But I wish. But that's quite interesting.
Oh, Mark,
And should be looked into.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, and for folks watching the show, if you're currently renting, just remember this: the median net worth in this country is roughly 400,000 for homeowners.
Correct.
And for renters, it's 10.
Yeah.
That's
So
huge difference.
We've got to find a way to get you into a house so that way you can start saving and building long-term, responsible, long-term generational wealth. And according to the Texas A&M Research Center, Real Estate Center, the median net worth or median sales price in San Antonio is in Texas, I should say, is $340,000. So if you're just doing an FHA loan, you need almost $12,000 for down payment.
Mm-hmm.
There's lots of down payment assistance programs out there that will help you. There, you don't have to worry about being low income.
That's right.
Or even being a first-time buyer for that matter. There's great programs to get you in a house today.
Plenty
So
of
take
them.
advantage.
No, that's great
Take advantage of them and check out I Think Mortgage or reviewmymortgage.com.
Or you can go to H&M. No big deal. There you go. So guys, gals listening, we will be coming back next week with a couple of different other folks to be talking about this same topic, but yet there will be different rabbit holes that we will definitely go down. I want to thank John and Andy for joining me today. This was not an easy topic. It kind of puts you out in the open, exposed, so to speak, with not only how much you know, but also how little others know, essentially.
Yeah.
And that is a very... I don't know. It's a very, very tough thing to come to terms with when you realize it and the numbers start turning into a story.
Yeah.
It paints a picture. That being the case, guys, again, thank you so much for joining me. Great discussion. And you guys out there, if you get something out of this, make sure to like, subscribe, share with a friend. We are continuing to grow our audience. We're now, I think, at over 7,500 subscribers, something like that, and growing. So apparently we're putting the sexy into mortgage because it was never there. Guys, we will catch you on the next one.
Thank you, Mark.
Adios.
Someone has already done and is already doing what you want to do. And no, they didn't fall into a rich family to do so. They were not born lucky. You know you can